Hello and welcome to a spin-off from the Doctor Who show. We call it The List Makers. I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
This is episode 56 and our topic today, top 5 living Doctor Who people you'd like to have on a convention panel.
Yeah. And can I say before we begin, Dave, this is a really interesting topic for me to think about over this past month. Because as some listeners will know, in my more recent life, like the last 10, 15 years, I've fallen out of love with convention type stuff. So when I make my list, I genuinely can't be saying, here's a list of people who, if they came to Sydney, I would pay to go and see. Because frankly, I probably wouldn't. Maybe we can talk about that later more in the show, though. But I just wanted to say that up front.
Yeah, no, it has been an interesting one. And as I've played this over my mind, particularly over the last few days, as I've sort of gone from a first draft list and a sort of a long list that I've pared down, it has changed a lot. Not just the numbers and the order, but the actual names have changed a lot. And my approach to it, I think, changed the more that I thought about it, which I hopefully will make for an interesting conversation. Now, the topic does specify living. I can tell you a topic with dead is in the How to Wrestle, and maybe sometime the next year or so we'll come to that one. But it is living people, Doctor Who people, at a convention panel. Rob, you're going first this month.
I am, Dave. In at number 5, I've got Lawrence Miles. A bit of a wild card here. Because I think Mad Larry has some fascinating ideas about Doctor Who, and he's got some of them into novel form in the Doctor Who range and later in the Faction Paradox range over the years. Ideas that would later be pillaged to some degree by the TV writers, which no doubt drove him crazy, probably as much for them not doing them as well as he would have done, and also for them pillaging them in the first place. And I think, getting Lawrence on stage, lobbing grenades and just not giving a as is his style, but also talking about his vision for the show and where it could go, I think would be genuinely interesting. So number 5, Lawrence Miles.
Nice.
In at number 4, I've got Graham Harper. In our recent Caves of Androzani episode, which I did with Mark Cockram, I spoke at length about Harper's direction of that story and how extraordinary it was. I think directors often have really great stories to tell about a TV show because they see the production from so many angles. They work with the actors, they work with the crew. They have this unique view of things. And so for all of that, not just Caves of Androzani, but all of Harper's career, I've got Harper in at number 4. In at number 3, I've got Mark Gatiss. This is another wild card, but it's in a totally different vein to Mad Larry. I think Gatiss has a background where he's been a fan, so he gets us. He started off in a small way. He wrote a new adventure novel, but then he ended up on TV and he did The League of Gentlemen, and then he got into Doctor Who writing, and then he appeared in Doctor Who. I'm doing a really terrible biography of him here, but I think it illustrates... I mean, hell, he went into Game of Thrones at one stage. He was acting on that. He made Sherlock with Stephen Moffat. Oh, shut up. He's had a really incredible career, in so many ways. He's done so many things. And regardless of what you think about his Doctor Who stories, because people seem to love half and hate half, and they're never the same episodes from person to person, I think he'd be a great conversationalist on stage. And the only real drawback to Gatiss, I feel, is that while he's pretty open and direct, maybe even more open and direct than most, he still works in the industry right now, writing, he's acting and so on. So you're never going to get the full dirt from him yet. So
Yeah.
In at number 2, I've got Tom Bloody Baker. I think Tom can still hold people's attention with his tall stories and just being Tom. So he can sit up there on stage and what he's saying can be complete bollocks, but it's funny and it's a bit mad uncle, and I think it's just pretty great. And that's that, Tom Baker.
Yep.
And finally, in at number 1, I'd be a poor Davo fanboy. I'd have to remove Davo, my doctor, from the opening credits of our flagship episodes if I didn't put him at number 1. I think the acid wit, the ability to call a spade, because he's at that point in his career where a bunch of people he worked with are now dead, so he can talk about them with impunity. And even just in general, he talks pretty loosely these days. I think that'd be pretty entertaining. So Davo for me at number 1.
That's a very cool list, Rob.
Thank you very much. I hope there were some surprises on it.
Yeah, no, there absolutely were. And indeed, I can say only one snap.
Wow, okay.
I've probably gone for, in hindsight, a more conventional list than you, but we'll talk about that after I've made my list. Now, I said, Rob, that there was one snap, and that is at my number 5, and it was your number 1. I have written here simply Davo.
Really?
And for all the reasons that you said, look, is David necessarily my favourite Doctor? No, he's not. Is it my favourite era? No, it's not. But as you say, he is now somebody who is at that point in his life, that point in his career, where he's actually happy to have a pretty open, robust conversation. And he still remembers a lot of his era pretty well. He remembers the personalities in that era pretty well. He's now been through and done commentaries on all his stories and docos about all his stories and all the rest of it. So it's all there in his mind. Plus he's still doing big finishes. But as you say, he's got that acid tongue. And I think given a proper interview on a panel where he can talk about his thoughts about the show, not just his era, but other eras where the show's going, I think would just be absolutely fascinating and a really worthwhile open conversation.
Great snap, yeah.
Number 4, I've gone with Philip Hinchcliffe because this is a man who is responsible for a lot of really good Doctor Who. And although I've got to hear snippets of his thoughts in docos along the way and the occasional commentary, it's all very much a key line, a key thought, or playing second fiddle to Tom Baker and Liz Sladen and Louise Jameson, who let's face it, their personalities you end up playing second fiddle to. And I just think getting Philip Hinchcliffe now as one of the last touches to a great era, as you know, Chris Boucher went not that long ago, Robert Holmes is long gone, David Maloney's gone, most of the directors in fact are gone. This is the last contact with a great era, just taking the time to really talk about his time on the show and a lot of the other things he's done in television I think would be really good.
Excellent.
I have one other Doctor on the list, and that is at number 3, and that is Peter Capaldi.
Okay.
Similar in vein to Peter Davison, Capaldi is a man who's got thoughts and he's got opinions, both about his era and about other eras. How wonderful would it be to hear Peter Capaldi talk about his childhood growing up watching the Pertwee era and the Tom Baker era, and maybe how his relationship with those has changed over the years. What are his thoughts on the 1980s and some of the perhaps weaker stories that some people might think that did he lose faith with Doctor Who, or did he love that era? But also we now have got probably enough time from when he left the show, and with enough people having moved on, that I think he would give a very honest appraisal of the good and the bad of his era. I think the time is ripe for that. I think he would be properly engaged. I think he would appreciate why, as fans, we want to get that level of depth about his era. So number 3, Peter Capaldi.
Nice.
Number 2, talk about an era that we need to have conversations about, and that I just don't think we have had conversations about, and that is the Chibnall era. So I'm having at number 2, Chris Chibnall himself.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought about who from modern Who I would want to have on there. And I thought, you know what? Russell T Davies, there's a lot to say, but he said a lot. Stephen Moffat, we've been hearing his opinions ever since before he was the showrunner, and he was just the grumpy old bugger that got up to tell us how much he hates the 80s, on the DVD specials. We've heard a lot about from Moffat and RTD, but I thought I actually haven't heard a lot from Chris Chibnall, and I certainly haven't heard anything from him retrospectively about his era. What did he think about how Jodie performed as the Doctor? What did he think about the way that Flux went down? How does he respond to feedback about the Timeless Children? What does he want to say about his era? I actually found, the more I thought of it, the more I realised how little I know of this man. And again, somebody who has been a fan, and big enough fan to go on TV and say how much he hated Pip and Jane Baker back when he was a spotty little student. So, he would have stuff to say. And I think given a proper chance to actually just chat about his views would be really, really interesting, and something I haven't seen.
Great, yeah.
Number 1, I've got somebody who is, I think, controversial, but again, outside of the occasional sort of canned comment on a doco, I don't really know well and understand and want to have long-form conversations about his views and his eras, and that is Eric Bloody Sayward.
Yep, great.
He is a controversial figure in the history of Doctor Who. I have often said that I think he is very underrated. I've often said that when you look at his era, there is a lot of really good stuff in there, and when Davo is hitting his stride, it's Eric Sayward that is behind all of that. When the Colin Baker era perhaps starts to fall off a bit, it's Eric Sayward who's there as well. Yeah. We know he didn't like John Nathan Turner. Fine. We've seen all that. But but talk about the things he did like. Talk about the highlights of the Davison era. Let's chat to a guy who's responsible for a lot of very good Doctor Who and some very controversial Doctor Who. And not shape it in a, okay, well, JNT's dead, so let's just get your view about everything JNT read wrong. No, let's talk about, Eric, what you did. I would love to talk to Eric Saywood at length. I really, really would. That's why he's my number one.
Yeah, great list, Dave. I'll say off the top, Saywood and Chibnall, I think, are really great calls, and Capaldi's a runner-up there for me.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. As I said, I started putting together this list, and my process is always the same for these lists. I look at the topic, and then I just jot down every name that comes into my mind. You know, who instantly comes to my mind when I think about this. And I was writing down a lot of really obvious, like, big name comments, and I thought, no, who do I really, really want to hear from? Who do I want to have a long form conversation with? And so names like Stephen Moffat went off the list. I've gone, I know what he's got to say, and suddenly I'm going, but Chris Chibnall. He's not even on my off the top of my head list, but yeah, I want to hear from Chibbers.
Yeah, I've seen him sort of lurking around on social from time to time, even answering people's questions, but in a very low-key sort of way. I don't think he even has that many followers on social media, and for someone who's a reasonable name, I find that quite strange, actually.
No, I mean, he is absolutely not the showman that RTD is. And frankly, in his own way, Moffat is. I mean, Moffat is not the everything's marvellous sort of showman that RTD is. But Moffat, is a bit of an after-dinner speaker who likes to tell an anecdote and have a wry story and everything. He is a showman in his own way. I think Chris Chibnall is just not. He's just a very shy, nerdy sort of bloke. And we don't see him. But Rob, when you did your list and you pulled out Lawrence Miles, I just thought, of course.
You just thought,
I did. I just thought, yes, why is he not on my list? And then I started thinking about those more obscure writer names that, yeah, I would probably want to see. And Matthew Jones would absolutely be up there. He wrote a couple of my favourite novels. He wrote one of my favourite New Who stories. He would be great to see. Rona Munro, a classic McCoy story, a classic New Who story. Lance Parkin, whose books we all love. And so many of them. I just thought, yes, there are so many. I think there are many advantages in being a fan in Australia, Rob, but a big disadvantage is that we are a 24-hour plane flight from all of these people. So, you might get, and you do get, big headline stars who can fill a room out here to Australia, but you're never going to fly Graham Harper out to Australia and pay all the expenses of a business class fare and a week of accommodation and your appearance fee and then sell it to an Australian audience. It's not going to happen. And we do miss all of those. Now, would I trade Chibnall and Capaldi and Hinchcliffe and Saywood off my list for Matthew Jones and Lawrence Miles and Lance Parkin and Rona Munro? Honestly, no, I wouldn't. Because I think you get better bang for value out of there. But as I did see your little sort of smaller ones like Harper and Gaddis, I thought, yeah, maybe I should have had a couple like that on my list as well.
Yeah, it's hard making these lists sometimes because we're trying to sort of maybe not appeal to our listeners, but maybe throw out a list that the listeners can get behind as well, rather than going deeply, deeply personal. So I didn't do 5 deeply, deeply personal ones. Like Lawrence Miles is a fairly personal one for me. Yeah. But someone like Tom Baker, I think everyone listening is like, yeah, bloody hell, I'd love to see Tom Baker on stage.
Yeah, and once again, if we lived in the UK, we would. I think it is absolutely the case. If we lived in the UK, you and I would have seen Tom Baker live on stage at some point, or at a signing.
At some point, yeah. Especially when I was a kid, because to tie it back to my opening preamble, I don't get a lot out of convention appearances because you have these people showing up and trotting out their convention stories and like, yep, that's great. I've heard that one 24 times before. Or, oh, I could have guessed that you liked making a popular episode or working with a renowned director. Wow. And this is compounded by there being loads and loads of conventions in every country around the world. And people film them and put them on YouTube and places like that. And we're saturated in appearances. There's just nothing special to it anymore to me. Even seeing someone in the flesh doesn't excite me like it did when I was a kid. And I've spoken about that before as maybe being in part due to my experiences at Paramount Pictures, where, even working with major movie stars became a bit ho-hum after a while. And that sounds so terrible, doesn't it? I know how that sounds, dear listener. Trust me, I do. But it's absolutely true. And add to that, there's an element that's just my personality. Like, okay, you were on TV 40 years ago, and... ... I'm just not into the idea of going to see people. But if I could have had dead people, I did start making that list. I won't mention them now because it sounds like it still could come out of the hat one day. But my dead people list is probably way more interesting.
It's always the way, isn't it? It's always the way. And yeah, I totally get what you're saying there. And I think particularly as conventions or day events or whatever have become a lot more professionalised, and that format is a lot more, okay, they get an hour scheduled, which in practice is sort of 5 to 10 minutes getting on stage, a couple of really stupid questions from a host who doesn't really know what he's talking about, and then a couple of sort of really, I won't say lame Q&A, but often the Q&A, the first couple of questions are ones that everybody could have asked and we all know the answers, and then it takes a while before they get comfortable and they're getting a couple of sort of newer questions or grittier questions, and then it's time to go because somebody else is due on stage at the hour. So, it is all very formalised, and some of them, you're right, have sort of got that 50-minute cabaret show that they come out and do. I mean, Fraser Hines, get him out there for 50 minutes. I can tell you what stories he's going to tell. He's going to tell the Knickers story. He's going to tell the when he bought a car to copy Patrick Troughton's story. He's going to tell, etc., etc., etc. And it's great that he has that retinue because it's 60 years since he did this stuff. And so, I'd rather he came out and said, right, here's my patter. Here's my pre-prepared little cabaret act, rather than just, oh, look, I don't really remember anything of that. That's fine.
Yeah.
But when you get them in a long form, you do get to push them a lot more. And we've seen that at some of the Sirens of Audio events that I've been over the last couple of years. Rob, I do want to note, I think your number 3 and my number 3 were perhaps the riskiest on both our lists, that being Gaddis and Capaldi, because, as you pointed out with Gaddis, they are both in the industry still.
Yeah.
And I wonder to what extent that would temper what they would be willing to say. I think both of them, particularly Gaddis, I think Gaddis Unfiltered would be wonderfully bitchy,
yes,
and just indiscreet, and I think that would be very, very entertaining and genuinely very insightful. But I don't think we'll get it yet.
No, I mean, you could imagine if you went to a dinner party and Gaddis was there, and the dinner party ended, most people had gone away, and you were cracking a bottle of wine with him. And he was like, okay, now let me tell you a few things, and you can't tell a soul about this. The stories you would hear would be fantastic.
Oh, look, I can remember one event where I went to with a Doctor Who actor who was very circumspect in the way that he spoke about Anthony Ainley when we were having the Q&A in front of an audience. And then when a few of us were fortunate enough to be, as you say, having a drink after him, somebody said, what did you really think about Anthony Ainley? And the reply was, yeah, he's mad as a cut snake. Totally mad. And yes, that's what you want to see. And look, I think the time will come when, Capaldi will be like Davo and just go, I don't give a toss. I'm just going to say what I think. And I think that Gaddis will get there as well. And that'll be really, really fun, but we're probably not there yet. But as I say, they're the risky ones on the list.
Yeah, of the two, I think Gaddis would be more inclined to do a fan event. I know Capaldi's done some, but he tends to sort of really not be dipping into that world too much. And whenever he's asked, would you go back to Doctor Who? He's like, no, my doctor's done. He's, flown off into the stars. Look,
all of them at some point start to find the work is not quite as common as it used to be. I mean, let's face it, if we were doing this 20 years ago, we would be going, there's no way you'll ever get Davo at a convention. And now that the work maybe is not quite as frequent as it used to be, he's happy to do it, and he's happy to write the 5-ish Doctors, and he's happy to do Big Finish. They all get there eventually. Should he get why your time will come?
Yeah, even when the Davison crew was doing things like Panopticon in the UK in the 80s, like the mid to late 80s, they're all so dismissive of the show and almost embarrassed about being there and a bit too cool for school. It's just so different to how they are now. They put on the shiny, happy face for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And they often do things as a crew, as you say. And again, they've sort of got their pattern, like, I'm going to make fun of Janet Fielding and she's going to make fun of me. And then we'll both make fun of Matthew Waterhouse. Ha, ha, ha. And that's why I think that getting Davo alone in long form just would, I think, break that pattern up and be really good.
Agreed.
But we are out of time for this one, Rob. That's really interesting. Only one snap. That's always good. Mm-hmm. But as I reach into Turley's How to Wrestle On, I pull out our topic for episode 57. From listener Steve F747, we have top 5 classic seasons.
Oh, crikey, that's a big one. It might not be your top Doctors, but it's pretty close.
Look, number 1 is easy. Number 2, probably. After that, how do you pick 3, 4, and 5 from... Oh, my God.
I'm pretty sure I know your number 1. But we can leave that till later. It's been fun, Rob. I'm looking forward to next month. But until then, I've been Dave. I've been Rob.
And we'll make some more lists soon.
Farewell.